Kshama, we were talking about this last time you were on the podcast when we had this kind of back and forth with Ryan Grimm over the rail strike, where it seemed like the fact that some union members who I completely accept are operating in good faith and are leftists and all of the things in the world, but the fact that some union members endorsed the squad's plan to vote for the rail strike so that they could pass it on to the Senate and have the possibility of having the up-down vote on the 7-day sick leaves. And again, they would have had that opportunity with or without the squad members' votes in the House because they had the votes for it already. But the fact of some union member endorsing this plan was used as a excuse or justification for a plan that had no strategic value in the least, and which had the kind of public media value. I mean, it had a lot of optical flaws. Had put the squad members on the side against labor and stripped them of an opportunity to really vocally speak against Joe Biden, who had the power not to endorse this settlement, which was rejected by the union as a whole, which is why we were in this situation in the first place. And it does seem to me that whether it's union leadership or some cohort of a union or some cohort of somebody who's supposed to be the good guy and have value, these leftist orgs that are co-opted that Imani is bringing up, the fact of their existence, again, is being used to justify this entire project, which is anti-worker and anti-left. And this is, again, why I keep coming back to this idea that, like, I've been tiptoeing around this for 2 years of doing this podcast. I've spoken to everybody I can get my hands on. Union leaders, union experts, people in the know, like begging them. Ash Colred, asking him about, well, why the heck can't an overwhelmingly Democratic legislature in California pass Medicare for all, and getting nothing but buckets of ridiculous excuses that just don't stand up to this tiniest amount of pressure. And I'm like exhausted of having to pretend like the problem isn't obvious.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
No, finish what you were about to say.
No. I was just going to set up a question for you, but go ahead if you have a response to that, Kshama. I mean, that's part of why I want to go through this clip of the excuses that AOC gave around not forcing the vote. Not because I'm trying to, beat a dead horse, but because for those people who seem to still believe that these are good faith actors making mistakes, let's just give them another shot. Let's just give them another 2 years, maybe 25 years from now, we can have Medicare for all. Like, I think it's really necessary. And I think it's very much incumbent on us to make it clear that we aren't just some rabble-rousers who don't understand power and don't understand politics that are just wishing on a prayer that these people would snap their fingers and manifest a progressive utopia. No, these are real strategic opportunities that they are made aware of and they decline to take for reasons that don't hold up.
And it really goes to show how much you need of a coalition in order to really forcefully negotiate for these things. So when people say, why don't we do this? First of all, there's a lot of cost and dysfunction. Second of all, those people who are holding out right now, they may have made certain structural gains, but they have also made incredible reputational and relational harm within their caucus.
Okay, so let's compare the gains that were obtained by the Freedom Caucus with this idea of reputational harm that clearly AOC here is valuing more than the gains. To be clear, the gains included a lot of things that progressives crowed about 2 years ago that they won behind closed doors. They got Cutco. The progressives crowed about getting pay-go 2 years ago. They got the ability for Kevin McCarthy's super PAC not to interfere in Republican primaries, which would have been a huge boon to get DMFI and Hakeem Jeffries' super PAC from not interfering in these congressional primaries that were attacking people like you, Imani.
They did end the blacklist, which is in that vein, but short of that commitment. I just want to throw that out there as long as we're assessing the gains. That was on the table, and they did that.
So you're talking about that I think it was around 2018, the Democratic Party promulgated this blacklist where if you were a vendor, if you worked for any of these progressive incumbent candidates, that you would be blacklisted from working for the Democratic Party going forward, which is insane to think about.
It was the lever that incentivized the attacks on people like Alex and Nina and me and Imani. Like, that was one of the tools that enabled that whole subversion of the process. But yeah, the progressives, my understanding is in 2022, the squad got the blacklist ended, which is at least a significant victory. I don't want to skip over it. It's
I think that's a completely fair point. The question becomes why this emphasis on doing the negotiations behind closed door, whatever they could get behind closed doors. I think it's fair to say you could have gotten more if you had been willing to take the fight public and be willing to make the kinds of threats that the Freedom Caucus made.
There's no question. Contrast AOC at two different points. She comes into Congress, does the sit-in at Pelosi's office. That makes the Green New Deal an object of household conversation across the United States. And then at the moment that you've all noted, just the force the vote moment, Pelosi's up for the speakership. AOC does not withhold support. And then what happens when the committee assignments come down? Who got the assignment to the House Energy and Commerce Committee that would have been the critical platform to develop the Green New Deal into implementing legislation? AOC didn't get that seat, even though she supported Pelosi. The person who got the seat was a right-wing Democrat who opposed Pelosi from the right, Kathleen Rice, which is to say the inside politics, deference to the establishment, inside negotiation track that the squad is pursuing, has literally put them behind the line behind the people who have openly challenged Pelosi from the right within the caucus. And there's no way to read that other than self-marginalization, other than, maybe to add, to dial that up a little bit, it's an abdication of the responsibility to represent. And this is another piece just throwing on the table. I think a lot of why people get concerned about whether it's the squad or others in the Progressive Caucus and not showing up in the way that we might want, even though they're not our respective members of Congress, geographically speaking, is that we have a dearth of voices in Washington who are willing even to talk, let alone walk, in a way that is critical of the establishment. And so people, I think, are latching on to voices from other districts that are not their own. What I think the productive takeaway from all this is to take these people, not the squad, I'm saying the centrists, the incumbents, to clean Congress entirely. And, I have some constitutional inspiration here, going back to Madison in the Federalist Papers, number 10. He talks about the danger of faction and how the only way to enable stability, and while still respecting liberty, is to ensure the proliferation of faction. And the proliferation of faction, and as I say, have as many of them represented as possible. The GOP has factions within it. This deference to the party leadership among the Democrats, this coalescence, this artificial value being placed on unity, it has a constitutional dimension in terms of reducing the number of factions and increasing the potential for corruption. That's what happens when you have parties exercising influence across the different branches and across the layers of government. That's how you get things like a judiciary that is complicit in executive branch abuses, or a Congress that just abdicates executive branch oversight entirely for generations at a time. And maybe that's the last thing I'll just throw out here is I think, we have in this conversation focused entirely on Congress, but there is, a pretty big accountability moment coming up, not the election of a new speaker, but the election of the next president. And I do hope that this disaffection with the Democratic Party, even the voices within it who, been less willing to walk their talk, does encourage a voice to emerge from the left to challenge Biden, because it's not just the House Democrats, right? It's all of the Democrats in Washington. And I think this makes it all the more critically clear how much we need a primary challenger to Biden from the left. And I think it's critical for the sake of the debate, for the policy, and frankly, to keep a generation of Americans who've seen nothing but abdication and deference engaged in the process, so that we might have an opportunity to flip some of these policies going forward.
Well, she hit at this point. Marriane Williamson has all but said that she said, I think in a recent interview on the Vanguard, that she has launched an exploratory campaign.
Yeah, I'm excited about that.
What do you make of that?
I'm incredibly excited about it for a couple different reasons. One, among the candidates who were on the presidential debate stage in 2020, I think she differentiated herself as being among the more insightful and humane. And she, in a different way than, many of us here, faced predictable smears. They dismissed her as someone who was not serious, somebody who didn't know her stuff. And she's encyclopedic about a great many things, including and well beyond politics and history. I think her insight could frankly do a lot towards shifting the attitudes in Washington, particularly for this reason. If you look at presidential election cycles between 1992, when Bill Clinton wins the White House, and 2016, when Trump wins the White House, every one of those presidential elections was won by a candidate claiming to be an outsider. The only reason Americans went for Biden in 2020, you covered it, you mentioned it before, was this coalescence by the centrists around their nominee to block the massive public uprising in favor of a leftist candidate. That plus the sort of centrist reaction to the unrestrained racist mania of a would-be autocrat in the last outsider in 2016 who won the election. All that is to say, America is over the DC political establishment. It has so thoroughly discredited itself that for the last 30 years, voters have been choosing people from outside it. And it's all the more reason I think Marriane, as a voice from outside it, might be poised to help identify, call out, and hopefully remedy some of these illegitimacies. At the very least, I think her presence on the debate stage is going to do wonders for educating the body politic. And, there's a big value in that in itself.
Yeah, I absolutely hope she runs. And I wish it were, in fact, a crowded field. Many people are looking at Katie Porter's choice to run for Dianne Feinstein's seat as a move, perhaps in the longer term, toward positioning herself to run for president. And I wonder what you guys make of that potential outcome.
A lot of tea leaves to read.
Go ahead, Imani.
So a couple of things, because there's one thing I did want to get in there that you mentioned before, which was, what did whatever progressives that are in Congress get by falling in line? I'm still waiting to see what Pramila Jayapal got. I am still waiting. She went on a spree. She went on a spree of endorsing against progressives, and I am still waiting, because a spree of that level, I would expect her to be
Hakeem Jeffries
at the top. I mean, yeah, a spree of that nature, and that it wasn't only my race. She went on a literal spree of endorsing against progressives, and I have yet to see where that got anything. So great question. I'm still waiting to find out. As far as, who's running against Biden, God, I hope somebody does. I mean, I honestly hope Biden doesn't run at all. I really hope not. I hope he doesn't run at all. I hope there is a fresh new batch of folks. I hope there are progressives that get in, because I think we'll lose if Biden runs. I mean, I just don't see what arguments he can make as far as what he delivered based on his promises. I think that especially for me, and I think also especially for a bunch of younger Black folks who are more and more becoming a larger part of the voting bloc, he didn't deliver on HBCU student loan forgiveness or student loan forgiveness at all. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that he just did not do. And then on top of that, I just don't think he has the gusto. If the Republicans put up their most charismatic person, I don't see that happening. I just see Democrats being told, hey, do you want to die? Because if a Republican gets in, you'll die. And I think people are just tired of that. People really don't want to just keep voting to not die. They want to vote so that they can get somebody in there that will pass policies that will make sure we thrive as human beings and that our human rights are respected and that we're not drowning in debt 24/7. I mean, real things. People want to vote for real things. At least Democrats do, or at least people on the left part of the spectrum do. So I really hope he does not run again. I doubt that he will have that insight and say, you know what, I should take a step back. I highly doubt it. But that's just my hope. I mean,
some people have been
the bottom of the barrel.
Have been saying that the fact of the this document scandal that's emerged is people within the Democratic Party wanting to force him out. Other people have argued that there was an intentional delay in announcing that story until after midterms because they wanted to protect Joe Biden. People are saying a lot of things. Kshama, I saw that you wanted to say something earlier about the Pramila Jayapal critique.
Yeah, and also about the whole discussion about somebody like Marianne Williamson. I'm sorry, I don't agree with some of the views here in the sense that I don't think we should be in the business of sowing illusions that somebody, yet another candidate running in the Democratic Party primary somehow going to be the hope, because fundamentally it's not about, I'll come to the candidate itself, but fundamentally it is not even about the candidate, it's about the party machine. The Democratic Party machine is not going to allow that kind of, the kind of uprising that ordinary people want, the kind that Bernie Sanders, the campaign that he ran on, that was hugely popular. I don't know if people remember, Bernie Sanders did a town hall with Chris Hayes, I think, and for some reason, I'm not able to find it on YouTube. I don't know what that is all about. But he did a town hall, on TV with working class white people in, I think, were based in West Virginia. And it was really moving because you had these very, very impoverished people, families who, to me, it almost seems like it looks like it's a third world. I mean, coming from somebody who grew up in India, and they were all in for Medicare for all, decent union jobs, taxing Wall Street to fund ordinary people's needs, and the Democratic establishment is completely hostile to that. So I just don't see, I mean, right now, I don't see the possibility of someone who, like Marianne Williamson, who's even politically weaker than Bernie Sanders. She's not even where Bernie Sanders was. How is that going to make it happen? I think we should not have that expectation, honestly, and not that we don't want a left challenge. Of course, we want a left challenge to Biden. You and I think, talked a few shows ago about it. It's absolutely, with Chris Hedges, it's absolutely necessary, but it's a question of in what political framework is that likely to happen? That's the question, and that also goes back to this question about Pramila Jayapal, and this idea that she followed the rule book of Nancy Pelosi, and what did she get out of it? But that's the wrong question, in the sense that she's not doing it in order to win something for working class people. I mean, that's just not why she's doing it.
Even if she's doing it to win for herself, I think my point was that she didn't even get to be speaker. Like, what is she? Even if it's for self-advancement, she's just as failing. She sold out, and for what?
But that's the thing. But that's what they have decided to do, because and actually there's a real lesson there as well, in the sense that unless you are an out and out corporate representative like Nancy Pelosi, like many others, meaning the establishment, will actually screw you over, even if you are not a full-throated advocate for working class people. So in that sense, and RBN pointed this out a few shows ago on their show on YouTube, Revolutionary Black Network, that in fact even AOC did not get the committee assignment that she's supposedly could have gotten. But I think that is all true. It's also missing one other link, though, and I think this is a fundamentally important thing that is not often visible from the outside, is that when you are in elected office, I mean, when you're campaigning as a workers' representative, yes, they will come hard at you. They will throw everything against you. Look at the way the Congressional Black Caucus and Progressive Caucus went against Nina Turner. I mean, they went all out against her. They punished her for even professing support for working class issues, let alone winning anything. And so you can imagine how much doubly so that force is against you when you are in office. And I've experienced that firsthand every single day. And really, what it shows is that and this, as I said, this is the part that's not visible always. It's when you are in elected office, you can see that, and it's our job to share it once we have that experience. That it's not really about what you can get by selling out. It's the fact that if you don't get in line with the big business agenda, they will make your own daily life absolute hell. That is the way it works. It is not even about money, in the sense that, yes, a lot of people in politics are really, politics is really murky under capitalism. A lot of them are making money, probably secretly and under the table, getting all kinds of perks. But it is not even just that. I don't think that the squad is engaged in any kind of shady maneuvers of that kind. But the reason they are selling out nonetheless, and they're not taking corporate money in their campaigns, all of that is true, but they are selling out nonetheless, because if they don't, then their daily life will be made absolute hell by all these forces that will circle around them. And I'm not saying this to justify what they are doing. I'm saying this to point out that because of that, there is no way you can do this work and not sell out. There's no way you can not sell out and also not be marginalized unless you have your own forces on your side, which means mobilizing a wider movement. And so when we talked about force the vote, for example, it was not only about forcing the vote, even though that vote itself was important, because that is job number one as a leftist. You have to expose the establishment. But it went beyond that. What we said in Socialist Alternative was that in addition to forcing the actual vote on the floor of Congress, the squad should be calling for force the vote rallies, Medicare for all rallies across the nation. That is when you unleash the power that is latent but is not actually in the forefront to stand with you. And that is what is a threat to the ruling class. I mean, just to give an example, the main corporate landlord lobbyist, he was actually the brother of the former mayor, Jenny Durkin. So, very corporate family, Democratic family, the Democratic Party family, that is not democratic. When he retired a few years ago as a corporate lobbyist, he said that all the money that the corporate landlord lobby spent in massaging their point of view to the Democrats in City Hall in Seattle was wasted because it could not stand up. All that money could not stand up against what he called, in his words, Sawant's army. And what he was referring to is the fact that when tens of thousands of renters get mobilized and the City Hall Democrats, all these so-called progressives who want to go around walking as progressive but never deliver anything so that they can play both sides, they were suddenly in front of a legislation, because I was there, they were suddenly having to vote on wait on evictions or against evictions of school children in the school year, on making landlords pay 3 months rent if they evicted tenants because the rents went up too much. Suddenly it was not abstract or theoretical anymore. It was suddenly very real. And that's when the tens of thousands of renters are saying, where are you? You say you're progressive. What are you going to do on this bill? That is when the rubber hits the road. And then even the corporate money, of all of it, the billionaire cash, none of it can withstand this kind of support from working people. And so when the squad don't do that, then they are left alone. And yes, in that context, absolutely, you are not going to be able to withstand. Nancy Pelosi will make your life hell as an elected official if you don't go along with her.
So, Kshama, I mean, we had this debate a little bit on an earlier podcast, the one you referenced with Chris Hedges. Like, I hear what you're saying about, and I think we all agree about what someone like Marianne Williamson is up against. But that's going to be the case for any progressive challenger. So the question is, do we just fundamentally give up on the idea of running people in presidential elections, which I think is a perfectly defensible position? Or if you don't agree with that position, which is to say, I just don't think that we should completely divest from electoral politics, at least on the national level. If that's not your position, then the question is, well, isn't it a benefit, even if you don't think Marianne's going to win, even if you think it's a symbolic run, the way I think Bernie's 2016 run started out as being, isn't it good to have someone on the debate stage to heighten the contradictions that you just described, that the squad are not heightening? Someone who is at least on the debate stage, pushing the Overton window back to the left, where it was at least at the end of the 2020 campaign, instead of just allowing the public imagination to exist somewhere between Joe Biden and Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, no, I actually, I'm absolutely not saying that elections don't matter. In fact, I think that kind of idea where it might be tempting to some people to say, well, politics is so corrupt under capitalism, I just want to dissociate from that. That is an understandable reaction, as you said. That is an understandable aspect. However, it's not helpful in the sense that if we don't have an actual challenge to the Democratic Party, then it leaves the field open for them to then play this game continually, where working people are kept in limbo, but there's no party that represents them. But then there's a whole section of working people that wants to put their faith in at least some Democrats or to some extent in the Democratic Party. So it's always in this ether of confusion that never gets resolved. So I don't think simply saying elections don't matter is a helpful position. I also don't think, and I'll come to your question about the specific candidate, but I also don't think that elections are the primary avenue for winning massive victories, and which is why we have launched Workers Strike Back. And that doesn't mean we wouldn't be supporting electoral candidates, but I think the primary focus has to be on movement building, even with the elected office.
That's fine, Kshama.
One second.
Okay.
Even with the elected office that we had, our primary focus was using movements to help win victories through our office. The starting point was never our office. The starting point was, how do we build movements to then strengthen our office in order to win victories? And it would be great if there was some challenge on the left. And I totally agree with you. Bernie Sanders' campaign did do a service in the kind of campaign he ran, and I do believe he's genuine. Even today, I believe he's genuine. I have lots of disagreements with him on strategy, absolutely, and I'm not shy about expressing them. But I also think that there are genuine people like that who do sort of give exposure to the working class issues, the hunger that working people have. What I'm saying is that as leaders on the left, we also have an obligation to explain what it will take to do that. So just hypothetically speaking, if we had a candidate who ran in the Democratic primaries, who used the approach that we have used, which is a fighting strategy, bringing up demands like Bernie Sanders, but then unlike Bernie Sanders, not just falling in line to support Biden or whoever else becomes the anointed nominee, for the coronation, but instead said, this is rotten. In fact, this is the Democratic Party is not on our side. We need to fight independently, and then I'm going to run as independent in the general election. And coming out of the election, I'm going to launch this organization that can go on fighting. If we had something like that, of course, I welcome that. My position is not that we should not have that. All I'm saying is I don't see it on the horizon.
So Marriane has said, she said in this Vanguard interview that she would do a dirty break. She said, they asked her that question specifically, and she said that when Donald Trump was asked that in the context of the 2016 Republican primary, he said, whether or not you were going to support the eventual nominee, he says, it depends on how you treat me. And left that threat looming in the air that he was going to run independently if he was pushed out of the Republican primary. Now, obviously he won, and so we never tested that theory. But, knowing that, does that change your opinion about Marriane's run? And moreover, are you really saying that but for someone willing to do a dirty break, you don't think there's any utility for the progressive movement from a messaging standpoint and having a progressive run in a Democratic primary?
I think it's a question of in on balance, what gains we can get. I mean, as I said before, of course, there were gains made just in terms of building the confidence of voters with having a campaign like Bernie Sanders. But on balance, what happened? On balance, people ended up getting demoralized because there was nothing that came out of it. And as a matter of fact, a lot of young people ended up getting... Sorry.
Is that a dog?
I think at least
oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Imani. After you, please.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just saying, I actually am pretty big on the idea that, maybe we shouldn't run in the presidency as far as progressives are concerned. I mean, I do see your point, Bree, about doing it just to push the way Bernie did in 2016. He shifted the entire conversation of the way we talk about every single piece of policy. But one of the things that really annoyed me about 2020 was that when the establishment Dems pulled the tricks that they pulled to get Bernie out the way, the entire progressive movement was like, we gotta help Biden now. And I just didn't understand why, when there were plenty of progressives running on the state, local, and in congressional races, we could have taken our stuff and said, oh, you stabbed us in the back. Well, best of luck. You guys have all the money in the world. You have all the consultants in the world. We're going to go and we're going to focus on our people down ballot. And I think we would have done a much better job. And now granted, I have no hope in establishment Democrats being able to do things well, right? So it really would have been a toss-up there, right? But we would have had a lot more progressives down ballot. And I have no idea. Well, actually, I do know why. I mean, it brought orgs a lot of money. It brought orgs a lot of clout. I know why they did it. But it was something I strongly disagreed with.
Look, me too. I tweeted that I didn't endorse Joe Biden and got just demolished on the internet for it. I tweeted out a couple of mild criticism Kamala Harris tweets that everybody should have health care. No one should die of COVID because they don't have health care. And I say, terrific. What wonderful logic. Why isn't the same true of cancer, diabetes, or any other ailment? And you had Tiffany Cross calling me a black white supremacist. And all of these MSNBC people.
I missed that one. I gotta go back into the crate.
Okay, she called me Tyrone Biggums. No, not Tyrone Biggums. What's the one from Chappelle's show? Who's the black Klansman member? I forget which one. Whatever.
I remember the skit. Not the character's name.
Wow. that this was the response from the establishment. And even left groups, you know how hard a lot of those like Black voting groups hit the pavement for Biden in Georgia. Like, they won him that election. And why? In the middle of 2020, with the George Floyd protests, all these Black people out in the street fighting for, and a multiracial coalition out in the street fighting because this Black man was killed on camera. Joe Biden comes up on camera as soon as he wins the primary and starts talking about, we need more cops, actually. Crime bill Joe Biden. And all of these groups still do it. And then I will never let this go. I'm sorry. That leaked tape where Joe Biden was talking to all of those Black civil rights leaders, where he basically is lecturing them about how they're not the number one minority anymore. And now Latinos are on top and you guys better just take what you are given. And no one's fought for Black rights longer than me. And how dare any of you talk back to me? And all of them, Al Sharpton and all the other so-called heroes, the head of the NAACP, they all, Sherlyn Ifill, they all just sat there and took it. Sherlyn Ifill presented a whole range of things that Joe Biden could do by executive order and very humbly said, if we don't win Georgia, because they didn't know yet, here's things you can do to advance the interests of these protesters in the streets anyway. And Joe Biden said, actually, no, you're going to do what I tell you we can do. And nobody said a thing. And then the tape leaks, embarrassing them all. And none of them used that opportunity to come out and actually object to Joe Biden. They all just continue to run cover for them. Sherlyn Ifill blocked me on Twitter because I very politely pointed out that she was right in that clip. I said, look at Sherlyn Ifill. She was right and Joe Biden should do what she said. And what did I get for that? A block. Because I believe, and I can't prove this, and if I'm wrong, I apologize, Sherlyn Ifill, you're welcome on the podcast to talk about it. But I believe it's because she was angling for a spot on the Supreme Court. It didn't work out for her, did it? So all of this for what? Go ahead.
I don't know. Like, I think the big takeaway here is that people got to understand the concept of power. Like, when Democrats would not win elections without the Black vote. That's just a fact. That's not even me being Black and saying that's literally a numerical fact. It's a numerical fact. So you have that power, wield it. Wield it. You don't work for them. They work for you. This is politics. They're public servants. The servant part is in there for a reason. They serve the public. So I don't know. But again, to bring it back to, what you were saying, I do see the point in having somebody just be running just to kind of push things to the left. But I would not be at all opposed if the left was just best of luck, establishment. Do what you got to do up there and just paid attention to down ballot. It's cheaper, easier to message. I mean, it could be a better strategy.
Shama,
if I may just throw out an...
Yeah, go ahead, Shahid.
Well, just maybe something of an inner position here. I rarely like adopting a moderate position because that's not what I'm aiming to do here. But if we look at the two polls, if one of them is, abandon presidential politics altogether, and the other one is invest all our hopes and dreams in yet another candidate. One of the reasons I'm excited by the vision that I hear Socialist Alternative developing and that I hope to see emerge in other networks is this whole point of recentering the base. And to the same theme that Imani is raising about public servants, putting candidates in a position to be taking their marching orders from the base. And to some extent, that's, we have movements that are assertively declaring, for instance, that we're tired of our neighbors ending up dead in the street. And then you have the Democratic establishment talking back about poll results, and your slogans don't poll well. The response to that is, that's not our problem, right? And there's a when Imani's talking about understanding power, another piece here is understanding leadership and assertion. And Democrats, I fear, know nothing of either of those things, right? And when we think about this week, reflecting as I have on the letter of from Birmingham jail, it seems to me like he was writing to today's Democrats in no uncertain terms, 60 years before they ever took the stage. Everything he said to the white clergy in the South, trying to get him to stop agitating for civil rights, the exact same arguments apply to the corporate Democratic center. And I would hope that after 60 years, we might one day finally heed the words of someone who we, created a monument for and a national holiday to commemorate.
Quite a monument it is, by the way.
Don't get me started about that.
But Shama, you had a bit of a canine conundrum over there. If it's resolved, I want you to be able to finish your point as well.
Canine conundrum is a good description. I hadn't thought about that. I don't even remember what I was saying at that time.
Well, you were. I was trying to pin you down on are you in fact saying that you don't think it's useful for any progressive to run against run in a Democratic primary, point blank, period? Or are you just more concerned about Marriane as a candidate?
Both. I definitely have concerns about Marriane. But my point is, it's not for me. It's not about this individual. I'm just saying hypothetically, if any candidate was to run the kind of campaign we feel would, we don't have illusions in the political process, in the sense that we know it is absolutely stacked against us, which is why, while I don't agree with the idea that we should just ignore elections, I don't agree with that because it's not helpful, really. And some of the purveyors of that idea are actually dishonest, because it's just, in some ways, those who are, there are many who are genuinely, they profess this idea that I'm just fed up of elections. Ordinary people are fed up of elections. We meet lots of people who are young people who don't even want to register to vote and they'll register for our campaign because ours is the only campaign they find worth engaging in. But then there are also some disingenuous purveyors of this idea, because then, you hear some DSA leaders saying, I'm just done with elections. But when you are in a position where you could have fought to hold politicians accountable and you didn't, and then you say, well, I'm just fed up of elections, that's not the road, whatever, then basically it's like a backdoor way of saying, okay, then the Democrats can do whatever they want. So I'm certainly not in that camp. I don't think that elections don't matter, but I also think that elections, I at least don't want to, be the one who's, sowing illusions in elections as a whole. And at the same time, we have to also be clear what kind of candidates we need. So I'm not saying anything against any one candidate, Brianna. What I'm saying is this is the kind of candidate we need. Because if I wasn't clear about what kind of candidate we need, then I would be party to not clarifying issues in the minds of working people. I would be party to the whole project of sowing illusions in the minds of working people and then confusing them as to what is actually needed.
Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.